Simon was 15, and he was walking silently through the city. He wasn't happy about the warm spring day, or the first leaves on the trees, or the sun peeking out from behind the clouds for the first time in days. The boy could not understand how the world could live and flourish when such sorrow, injustice, and such terrible tragedy happened to him. There the little boy was walking and holding his mother's hand. She was telling him something, and he, jumping up and down amusingly, was walking beside her and laughing. A long time ago, Simon was the same carefree and cheerful boy holding his mother's hand. But now, she's gone, leaving him alone. She abandoned him, forgot her little boy, and didn't take him with her. She died. Simon couldn't help himself and cry. It sounded very childish and loud, but he felt like a poor child lost in this big and different world. Catherine, Simon's mother, had died 40 days ago. She was very young, only 35 years old. She had been fighting the disease killing her from the inside for the past 2 years, but she couldn't win the battle. Catherine spent a lot of time in the hospital, and Simon was always by her side. He loved his mother more than anyone in the world. She was beautiful, kind, and caring. But why had this injustice occurred and she became ill? Mommy! Mom! Why did you leave me? Simon tore his heart apart with heavy thoughts as he walked slowly down the street. He wiped away his tears and walked over to the flower shop. "Oh, Simon, is that you?" The saleswoman smiled sadly at him. "Look what beautiful tulips we have today. Will you take them?" "Yes, Mrs. Thompson. Give me those tulips, please." The boy took the money out of his pocket, counted out the right amount, and dropped the clinking coins on the counter. Then took the flowers and nodded to Mrs. Thompson goodbye and left the shop. The boy is suffering so much. There hasn't been a day since his mother died that he hasn't been to her grave. It doesn't matter if it's cold, raining, or windy outside. He always goes and sits by her grave, she said with a sigh to her co-worker, who looked out of the storeroom. "Is he an orphan now? No relatives left?" She shook her head. "He has relatives, a father and a grandmother, but that doesn't make the boy's life any better. His grandmother is very old, and his father drinks himself to death," Mrs. Thompson answered. "How do you know about that?" the girl asked. "My mother told me. She lives next door to them. I don't know them, but my mother says it was a good family. They were poor but friendly, and when Catherine got sick, everything went downhill. They sold the car and a lot of stuff from the home to pay for her treatment, but nothing helped. Cancer doesn't spare anyone, whether you're rich or poor," Mrs. Thompson replied. "Oh, what a sorrow. So sad to see the boy suffer with such a fate," she said sorrowfully. "Yeah, that poor boy worked as a courier, washed cars, and cleaned streets just to get some money to help his mother, and now he's bringing her flowers to her grave. Poor boy. He's a decent person. There aren't many like him nowadays." Mrs. Thompson sighed and wiped the tears from her eyes. Simon walked over to the familiar grave, touched the portrait of his mother leaning against the tombstone, and cried again. "Mom, I miss you so much. It only gets easier when I come to talk to you here, but please, don't worry about me. I'll be fine." But Dad started drinking a lot. Grandma cries all the time, and her heart aches. She says you're waiting for her, and your favorite geranium wilted. Can you imagine? I don't know why. I guess it didn't want to live without you either." Simon talked to his mother for a long time. He talked about school, remembered the time when they were still together, and knowing no one would see him here, he wept bitterly like a child, dropping his tears on the flower-studded grave. Matthew, the cemetery caretaker, watched from afar. When he heard the boy's quiet but tearful voice, he stepped closer and shook his head. "I can't believe my eyes. He's here again. I have to do something about it. It looks like no one else can help him. He can go mad because of grief," Matthew thought. He silently walked over to Simon, sat down on the low bench, and asked, "Mother?" "Mother," Simon nodded and hurriedly wiped his wet face with his sleeve. "I know how you feel. I lost my mom when I was a kid. You're a big boy now. I was only 9, Matthew muttered. "And how did you live?" the boy asked. Badly. I had no one but her, so they put me in an orphanage. You have no idea how hard my life was. I starved and got beaten up a lot. What were you beaten for? Wondered Simon. Just because most of the kids in the orphanage never knew their parents. They didn't know what it was like to live in a family. And I was lucky enough to know that, so they were jealous of me, so they beat me. Matthew sighed and then asked, What's your name? Simon, the boy answered quietly. That's a good name. I'm Matthew, the man uttered. Who are you visiting here, Matthew? Simon looked at him. No one. I'm the caretaker here, keeping the place in order. Vandals have been coming here lately, destroying monuments, doing all kinds of nonsense. There's nothing human left in them, the man replied. Both of them were silent, and then Matthew suggested, Buddy, listen to me. I can see that you loved your mother. It's good that you loved and respected her so much, but still, you need to pull yourself together and move on. Come here on her anniversary and a couple more times a year, but you don't need to come here more often than that. Tell me, would your mother like that? I miss her a lot, sighed Simon. You'll miss her your whole life. There's nothing you can do about that. But you have to let your mother go. Let her soul rest in peace. What do you mean, let her go? The boy asked in surprise. Just say goodbye. Write her a letter. Ask her to help you cope with your troubles and yearnings from the other world. Write about everything you feel, and you'll see. She will help. She will definitely help. All right, nodded Simon. I'll try, but I don't have a pen or a piece of paper. No problem. I'll give you a pen and a piece of paper. Stay here and think about what you want to tell her. And how you want to say goodbye, the man said and left. Soon Matthew returned with a notebook and a pen, handed them to Simon, and left again, leaving the boy alone with his thoughts. While the boy was busy writing, Matthew took a pot of red blooming geraniums from his gatehouse, took it outside the cemetery fence, and placed it on the walkway, then returned to Simon, who was already holding a letter. So, finished? Now let's dig a little hole next to the grave and put the letter in there. Did you have time to write everything you wanted? The man asked. Yes, I said goodbye, and I asked her to help my dad stop drinking and help my grandmother to get well, said the boy hopefully. That's good. Now come on, I'll walk you out, said the man, pointing towards the exit. And they walked down the narrow walkway, talking quietly. Suddenly, Simon stopped abruptly and cried out in surprise. Mom's geraniums! But how did you know that? The boy asked in surprise. Me? Wasn't me. I have no idea how it got here. There certainly wasn't anything here when I walked by. Matthew lied, not admitting that he'd heard Simon's words. You don't understand. My mom had the same geranium, but after she died, it wilted. I told her about it. It's some kind of miracle, mouthed the boy confusedly. Well, bring that miracle home, and may all be well with you. The time of sorrow will be over soon, but happiness will surely find you, Matthew smiled. The boy thanked Matthew and left holding the cherished pot tightly in his hands. His grandmother and father met him at home. His grandmother had already baked a pie. She was feeling much better today than she had felt lately, and his father walked over to his son, hugged him, and said, I'm sorry, son. I haven't been myself lately. Mom wouldn't like it, but I won't drink anymore, I promise. We have to move on, son, and we'll be fine. Simon sighed happily and hugged his father, and in the evening the doorbell rang. Simon opened the door and saw Molly, the girl from next door. Simon, I've been waiting for you, and you still don't show up. I miss you so much, the girl said modestly. She suddenly took a step, snuggled up to him, and cried. Come on, don't cry. You and I will be all right. Everything will be fine. He stroked her head. Molly raised her head, looked Simon in the eyes, and smiled. I love you, Simon. I've loved you for a long time, and I want you to always be by my side. He leaned in and kissed the girl's teary, salty lips for the first time in his life. I promise to be by your side, and I love you too, Molly. Simon sighed quietly, embraced the love that had come to him, and thought that Matthew was right. The time of sadness and sorrow was almost over, and it was replaced by a time of peace and happiness.